Why does Hannah light 4 candles in the chapel? Is Uncle Henry really talking about an imaginary friend? Why is Dani's hotel room number so important? Let's find out all the hidden secrets in the Haunting of Bly Manor. Dani's name is special. You definitely can't underestimate anything when it comes to the haunting of. Writers have spent a crazy amount of time thinking about every last detail, making sure everything has meaning. Most of us probably thought that Dani Clayton, aka the au pair, was just a name that sounded good enough. But even that was thought out. Dani is actually named after Jack Clayton, the director behind the 1961 horror movie The Innocence. The Innocence was one of the first noted adaptations of The Turn of the Screw, so it all makes sense. It's just a hidden detail that you wouldn't even notice if you didn't already have the info. How cool was it for them to acknowledge the movie though? So many writers wouldn't. Hannah's candles. Hannah Gross is such an important character throughout the entire series. She's caring, warm, and her unspoken love for Owen is so sweet. From the very start, you get the impression that Hannah is in her own head a lot, as she can often be found in the chapel, lighting candles. In one scene, she lights 4 candles, one for Rebecca Jessel, the deceased governess, and one for Lord and Lady Wingrave. However, viewers don't really stop to think who she lights a 4th one for. Is it someone that she's personally lost? It isn't until much later that we find out who the candle was really for. It was Hannah herself, who was pushed into the well by Miles the same day that Dani arrived at Bly. It's tiny little details like this that make Mike Flanagan and the other writers creative masterminds. Dani's hotel number is a homage to Stephen King. Horror fans everywhere might have noticed this reference if they were quick enough to catch it. When we are first introduced to Dani, she's new to England and is trying to find a job. When she finally lands one at Bly, she goes back to her hotel room to pack up her things and get the hell out of there. Eagle-eyed viewers would have noticed that her hotel room number was 217. That's the number of the room in Stephen King's The Shining, where all the bad, awful, horrible hauntings go down. When Stanley Kubrick made the movie starring Jack Nicholson, he changed it to 237. When The Haunting of Hill House came out, Stephen King himself said it was the closest thing to genius he had ever seen. Director Mike Flanagan was then hired to write and direct the on-screen adaptation of King's novel, Dr. Sleep, which is probably why he wanted to play homage to King in this way. The Innocence was a huge influence. Not only was Dani's name a big nod to the 1961 movie The Innocence, but there are other things in the series that directly reference it too. The eerie song Oh Willow Wally is one of the first things we hear in the first episode, and it sets the tone for the rest of the story. However, this wasn't just a coincidence. The writers didn't just pluck it out of thin air. They took it from The Innocence, where it was used in a similar way. Deborah Kerr plays the governess, and she's out in the garden in the trees when the song starts to play. That's not all though. When Owen first picks Dani up at the station, she's completely taken with how beautiful everything is and tells Owen to stop. She wants to walk the rest of the way. Again, this exact thing happens in The Innocence, but unless you've seen the original movie, you would never know. It's the perfect little hidden secret. Miss Jessel was Poppins. Jamie calls Dani Poppins as a kind of pet name. Dani is a governess, and so is everyone's favorite nanny, Mary Poppins. While this reference of the Disney movie isn't exactly hidden, there's another reference that goes by unchecked. In a flashback to Miss Jessel's arrival at the manor, Rebecca tells Floral that she isn't practically perfect, but that she is perfectly splendid. Flora then repeats this line throughout the entire series. It was even used in the advertising, but let's be honest, how many of us realized it was from the Julie Andrews movie, aside from Jamie calling Dani Poppins? So as much as we might think that Dani is Poppins, Rebecca got there first. Henry's soldier was real. There were so many hidden ghosts in The Haunting of Hill House, so it's only natural that Mike Flanagan would do the same thing this time around too. There are many that we could do an entire video on that alone, but let's talk about one in particular. When Flora first starts to see the faceless figures around the house, she tells her mom and Uncle Henry. Henry tells Flora it's totally fine and not to worry, because he used to have an imaginary friend that was a soldier who he was very scared of. We later see the soldier when all the ghosts are revealed, so we learn that it wasn't an imaginary friend at all, but a spirit. Peter's flowers. When the love story between Peter Quint and Rebecca Jessel starts to unfold, we see it all play out from start to finish. Peter brings a bouquet of white and red flowers to Rebecca in the classroom, but he pretends to give them to Flora so Flora doesn't feel left out. It was one of the first moves that made Rebecca fall for Peter. Later on, when Miles apologizes to Dani for all of the hurtful things he's done to her, he hands her a bouquet of flowers that are exactly the same. We don't know it then, but it's later revealed that Peter can possess Miles, so this is a big clue about what's going on. Henry's ghost is a Hill House reference. We're assuming that if you're here, then you've watched the series by now, so no need for a spoiler alert, but we're gonna go ahead and throw one in anyway. Spoiler alert, Uncle Henry is tormented by the loss of his brother and his wife, so much so that he's haunted by this creepy version of himself night after night. Before we discover that Viola's gravity is what keeps all the spirits trapped at Bly, we think the ghost is part of the bigger picture. In reality, Henry's ghost isn't a ghost at all, but just his subconscious struggling to deal with everything that's happened. The exact same thing happens in Hill House, when Hugh Crane keeps seeing his deceased wife, when really she isn't a ghost at all. Incidentally, Henry Thomas plays the part of a young Hugh Crane in the first season and also plays the part of Henry Wingrave in Bly Manor. What do you think? Did you catch any of these little secrets, or did they pass you by like spirits in the night? Let us know in the comments. Stay spooky!